So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Matt Healy, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing for Intelligent Automation at Pega. He also leads product strategy and marketing for Pega Platform. And that involves helping drive roadmap and go-to-market strategy around AI, automation, and low-code, all with an eye toward increasing business agility, operational efficiency, and developer effectiveness, no less. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Doing well. Awesome intro. Thanks for having me, Adrian. I think I finally found my home on the Punk CX podcast. People have been calling me the Sid Vicious of AI for, I don't know,
who knew?
For minutes now, at least.
You claimed it. So in that intro, anything you'd like to add? Anything we missed out? Anything that's substantive that you want to say kind of on top of the intro?
No, I think you nailed it. I'm responsible for the go-to-market around the Pega platform. And, large enterprises, the world's largest brands, in fact, use the Pega platform to drive their mission-critical operations and customer service functions. So, I'm really responsible for engaging with them, understanding their vision in those areas, and then really helping them, transform those areas of the business faster, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And then, figure out pragmatic but super effective ways to adopt AI at scale.
Perfect. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, well, one of the things I wanted to talk about is that I've known Pega for a while, and Pega's the boat sort of shifts and lands on different, it develops new stuff and shifts and lands on different sort of like kind of themes. And I think that the way that you guys go about it, I really like. But you're really focused on two things right now: legacy transformation, but also why it's important for organizations to have a real strategy with respect to AI agents in order to get meaningful results, other than just applying them everywhere and then crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. And so of those two things, I wanted to explore them a little bit kind of with you, if I may. So if we can start with legacy transformation. I mean, it seems to me that the way that many folks often talk about legacy transformation, or sometimes they don't, you might think it's not a big issue or challenge. And then they'd be wrong, right?
Yeah, I think that would be wrong. It is funny, like the sort of presence of legacy debt doesn't get a lot of airtime in maybe like mainstream media forums. We're always talking about the future and AI and, automation and the cloud and all this stuff. But, if you talk to anyone at a large enterprise who's working either with or within the IT department, they know that they have hundreds, maybe thousands of systems which they need to get off of. They're just non-strategic. And, they're dragged down as a result of these. We actually recently did a study that found, on average, large enterprises are spending $370 million per year on legacy debt. And, that's spread across the more apparent costs, like operations, infrastructure, licensing, maintenance. Mm-hmm. But then, there's a multitude of hidden costs with legacy debt. Mm-hmm. Impacts to your efficiency or your customer experience or your employee experience. So it's a big problem still.
And so I wanted to just dig into the sort of the legacy debt sort of term. I mean, because debt's quite a heavy term, depending on your relationship with money sort of thing. It can sometimes have a lot of negative connotations. I mean, is it all bad?
No, it's not all bad, for sure. And I think that's one thing as you start to dig in with enterprises is there's no like one size fits all approach, like to, hey, you have to get off of all of your legacy systems. Mm-hmm. A lot of these systems, like, mainframe is still, widely used. I think like 70% of Fortune 500 organizations still use a mainframe. And there's a lot of workloads that won't get off of mainframe in probably my lifetime. And that's fine because it works for those use cases. And, those are areas where maybe they don't need to drive as much innovation.
You're right.
But then, there's still tons of workloads which would benefit from, unlocking that data to drive AI.
Right.
from, new levels of automation, from exposing them to customers for more self-service use cases, from improving the employee experience and giving people better platforms to work within. So, you gotta take a look at your inventory as an enterprise, figure out what's your overall strategy, what are sort of your principles for
Yeah.
driving those transformations, and then take it from there.
Yeah. No, 'cause I just think it's important because sometimes these terms get like slapped on and you're like going, oh, that feels like it's like you're putting on this big rucksack and it's like, wow, it's this big heavy load. And you're like, wow, but is it, I don't want to understand if it's that bad. But I mean, I know you talked about 70% of these big enterprises still rely on some of these legacy applications or mainframe applications and things. I mean, can you give us a bit of a flavor of, I know that I've seen some demos and stuff, a bit of a flavor of some of the sort of code and systems that we're kind of talking about kind of here, because it's going to allow to see us, it allows us to go and look into what's in the cupboards in the back of these kind of like these storage rooms. You're like, going, yeah, these things are still there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually working with a state agency, and they were telling me that one of their core systems for orchestrating, welfare programs, it was actually developed under a grant which JFK signed off on.
No.
So it's still housed in the mainframe, and as a result, it's like receiving welfare and signing up for those programs and getting your benefits. That's like a paper-based, document-based process in that region. So, what we were talking about is what would it look like to begin to extract some of those core workflows, some of that business logic, bring it forward to the cloud and be able to deliver the constituents an improved experience where someone could sign up for welfare and check their benefits, see status on their phone.
Right. Okay. I see. It's like giving people access to some of those sort of things. So as you say, they can self-serve, but also can bring some of that technology, some of those processes, some of that data to life, I guess, or at least open it up so you can make more choices about it rather than being stuck in a cupboard somewhere in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there's many different approaches for a different use case. That same state agency might analyze a legacy system and say it's fine to stay here. Or, there's also other approaches that are like, oh, should I, retire this application and purchase a new sort of more off the shelf solution to manage this area of the business. So
yeah.
Comes down to, having sort of those principles and analyzing your systems and then figuring out the right approach for the right type of workload.
And so what are we kind of like, what's the art of the possible when we start applying sort of this, agentic AI technology to some of this, like some of these legacy transformation kind of like challenges that many organizations are facing?
Yeah. I mean, these large enterprises, they're no dummies. So while they may have tons of workloads still in on-premise legacy systems, it's not like they haven't tried to get off them in the past, or at least like had that conversation. And one stat which sticks out to me is 70% of modernizations fail.
Yes.
And the reasons they fail are really, it comes down to one, traditionally it's taken too long. These are 5-year projects to get off of a mainframe system or get off of, a custom .NET system or whatever. You got to bring in a bunch of consultants to read through the code, generate a ton of documentation about what this application does. Because the reality is oftentimes you don't know what it does.
Well,
if there is documentation, it was written, 20 years ago. It's out of date now. And there's no comments in the code. It's just, so you have to understand the application, and that's traditionally taken a long time. Then you got to align people on the path forward. What are you going to bring forward? What are your areas to introduce new optimizations? What's your sort of rollout plan? And then you actually have to go through the process of creating new systems to replace the old systems. And that's been traditionally more custom development. So overall, you're talking, 10 years, $50 million, $100 million to drive a legacy transformation program.
And I think that's further complicated when you talk about the length of these programs. And if you think about the average tenure of like an exec, a leader, a professional in one of these enterprises, the average is probably less than 5 years. And so you end up with this employee kind of turnover, and then priorities kind of like change, markets shift, and all these different things. And so it's no wonder some of these big things kind of like, have a hard time passing muster, as it
Yeah.
were.
Yeah, I'm a big sports fan. It's like, a general manager in the NBA. They're not going to go make a big swing to like trade their star player because, they'd rather ride it out for 5 years until their contract ends. And so some of these are traditionally higher risk,
Mm-hmm.
higher reward moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where agentic AI has really introduced a new opportunity is by, really accelerating the end-to-end journey and being able to take off some of the manual work that's been traditionally, run in terms of understanding these systems and beginning to build that path forward.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that one of the also the bigger things. I mean, I saw this really cool demo when I was watching some of the keynotes at PegaWorld this year. And I mean, unfortunately, I couldn't be there this year, but I was able to watch it sort of live streaming. And the one of the ones that stood out to me, which speaks to this kind of point, there was this old credit management system COBOL app that somebody was running. They were filling it all in, but doing a voiceover, and it was all done as a screen capture with the real time sort of watching the screen and then doing the voiceover. And they took that and chucked it into Pega Blueprints, and it was able to spin up. This is what you're seeing. This is what it would look like on a modern kind of platform. And I was a bit like, for me, you have all these kind of whiz bang sort of other sort of announcements, and I was a bit like, that's the shit. That's the thing. Right? Because some of these problems are very much holding organizations back. I mean, I know that there's I remember going to a course, was it late last year? It was at the Copenhagen Institute for Foresight Studies. And they had this model about sort of trying to predict what the future was. And they said, like, on one point, there's based on a triangle. On one point, you've got forces that are pulling you into the future, which might be the potential of new technology and so on and so forth. You've got forces that are pushing you into the future, which might be your desire to grow or expand into new markets, or even just to harness some of this new technology. And most people kind of focus on those two sort of things. What they forget is the third point of the triangle, which is the anchors, which is what represents what is possible based on your current state of being, as it were. And I think the legacy kind of piece very much speaks to that. And I thought the demo with the application of that old COBOL app, and I hasten to add, I mean, this is COBOL that's possibly been written like 50 years ago. And there's a complete, I don't know, drought in the number of COBOL kind of like programmers and out there that can potentially understand some of this sort of stuff. So to be able to take an old thing and just narrate a user experience and then have it ingested into an application that then spins up here's what it would look like in a modern kind of architecture that you can test and you can further develop and so on and so forth. I thought was crazy. But I also know, I'm going to shut up now, because I also going to know that that's been a big, based on this legacy transformation thing, that I think that's also a big area of focus for you, is how can you kind of almost like widen the funnel in terms of the amount of inputs your blueprint could take as the gateway to your kind of platform. And I wanted to understand, what sort of things have you been working on to kind of fling open the doors to give people more possibilities around that legacy transformation?
Yeah. No, it's been a super exciting journey over the past almost 2 years. So about 2 years ago, with all this generative AI stuff, I'm just going to give you the whole sort of, origin story of the blueprint capability. So, we're always doing studies on like, hey, what's the long pole in enterprise transformation and really in Pega implementations.
Mm-hmm.
And we were finding that on average, teams were spending 3 months in what they were calling sprint zero.
Okay.
Sprint's supposed to be 2 weeks, but here we are, 12 weeks in. And, really all that time is really requirements gathering.
Right.
All right, what do we need to solve for? How are we going to architect it based on the requirements? How are we going to turn that into a backlog, user stories? You're sending Word documents back and forth. You're doing murals and whiteboards and all this stuff. Just takes a long time. So we're like, hey, can generative AI and really a new sort of approach to business and IT collaboration help here? So we introduced this capability called Blueprint. It's great. it uses AI to do research on best practices and help give you a starting point based on your use case. And then it allows business and IT teams to work in the same palette to capture their requirements faster,
Mhm.
and then turns that into the starting point of your application.
Mhm.
So it's been great. We had Vodafone at PegaWorld talk about how they're using that to deploy new workflows to automate their network operations in 40 hours.
Okay.
So from idea to a new automation in under a week, which is unheard of. But that really picked up for Pega projects. But the enterprises we deal with, they were like, hey, dude, like, good stuff, but I'm not starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I have a legacy system here. So we were like, oh, okay. So what can we do to, really turn the lens and apply AI in helping understand what's already in place and then use that to inform your future state architecture and requirements? So over the past couple of months, we've begun to introduce a set of AI agents, each which are sort of purpose built to understand like a different medium
Okay.
of information. So we started with, process diagrams, things like BPMN models,
Mhm.
and turning those into workflows in Pega. We expanded to data models and being able to take in like a database export and turn that into, an integration map in Pega. And then we started to get into documentation because people were like, hey, I have a standard operating procedure or a user manual for an older system. Can I
Mhm.
turn that into new workflows? And we were like, yes, AI is great at that. And then we started to get into, I have no documentation, I have no assets,
Yeah.
but I have this system I need to get off of.
Right.
So we
And
were doing,
that's particularly kind of like, I think, kind of prevalent in this kind of like space where you have enterprises that go and acquire older firms, right?
yeah,
And they acquire them and integrate them, and then stuff just gets lost, right? When people cycle out and stuff gets lost, and they were like, "Oh, we're using this thing and it's really important, but we don't know how it works.
yeah,
Where's all the paperwork?"
yeah. You do a merger, you might like cut the workforce a little bit or whatever, and then there's just brain drain in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the people around who understand what these systems do. So we were doing a complaints application replace. An enterprise, an insurer was trying to get off of Lotus Notes, which was
Okay.
driving their customer complaints.
Blimey.
And we
Lotus
were like,
notes.
Lotus Notes, yeah, good stuff. I had never seen it before, to be honest. I don't know
Whoa.
if I want to see it again.
No, exactly.
So, but we were like, hey, you have no documentation, whatever, but could we sit down with one of your users who really understands the complaints workflow, and, just record 30 minutes of them actually using the application in the
Mm-hmm.
ways that they would, walking through, I would click this, then click this, and here's why, and whatever. So we recorded that session and we built an AI agent which could take both the transcript, so
Yeah.
that person narrating their day, and then also actually interpret the screens itself.
Right.
Uh, so we now have that productized and it's part of Blueprint where you can import a video of a legacy system and it will extract the user journey, the user flow, the data elements, and then any user requirements as well to build out the framework for your application.
Wow, that's cool. I mean, because it also kind of feels like that's great because also it feels like it also speaks to this idea that oftentimes people in organizations, like you said, they have business operating kind of model or a business, operating procedure, or they have a process kind of documentation, and they have done all these different things. And then you're like going, yeah, but speak to people on the front line, and they'll tell you a completely different story because they'll be like going, yeah, that doesn't quite work, but there's this workaround and all these different sort of things. And I guess that sort of helps capture the variance between what people think is actually happening and what is actually happening as well.
Yeah, 1000%. And oftentimes in these legacy systems, there's like, you have your code base or whatever, 85% of it is old, never used,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's important to like also sort of start with what's actually happening on the ground. And a lot of this stuff you can just ignore. And it's like true in the word debt that you
Right.
can
Yeah.
sort of get rid of.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like, actually, sometimes it's just not obvious. You think you've got debt, and then you go like, well, there's debt, and then there's the real debt. And it's almost like you need to shine a light on all of it to be able to kind of capture it, because otherwise you're building something which is just not fit for purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so, we've also started to work with our ecosystem
Uh-huh.
on this. So we have a big partnership with AWS and a number of SIs, like, the large guys, Capgemini, Accenture, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And they're all also driving, legacy modernizations and transformation projects. And they have oftentimes platforms which can actually analyze the source code
Okay.
and produce documentation on what it does. So for maybe about 15 of these platforms, we've actually built integrations with Blueprint to ingest their source code document analysis and turn that into new applications in Pega as well.
Nice. Nice. Crumbs. Yeah, well, you've set up the tools and there's a lot of work to be done. So I guess people just need to have at it, really.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have we have a lot of really good projects that are in flight, and we're going to be showcasing this at reInvent too. So if you're going to be there,
Oh,
catch me. I'll
well,
be doing a talk about mainframe modernization and some of the client successes that we've had.
oh, you get all the cool gigs. So,
Mainframe modernization. Don't know. Maybe it's punk. I don't know. Is it cool?
well, I tell
Maybe.
you what, I kind of like it might be, just because in current times it might be. I mean, at the time of recording, I just wrote a piece around somebody doing uh, putting AI into on-prem sort of like software, because some people are just going, I still want to be on-prem based on my estate and different sort of environments that I'm in. And you're thinking, well, why should they have to miss out actually? And I just thought, I like that. I think that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think we've done a lot of work on like sovereign cloud. Same
Yeah,
idea. So being able to deploy within various regions and have it all run there.
yeah. So we talked a little bit about legacy transformation. Now I wanted to come back to the second point I started with, which was why it's important for organizations to have a real strategy with respect to AI agents in order to get meaningful results. I mean, let's start with, I mean, there's a lot of noise out in the marketplace. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of what's going on and the kind of the rhetoric and all these different sort of things? What's working and what's kind of not?
Yeah, there is a lot of noise, a lot of hype. I feel semi-responsible for some of it, but it's all good. Uh, you know, m- the reality is I'm just a little bit of a skeptic by nature.
Right.
I got to see something working in action in order to be able to trust it. And I think a lot of people are like that. And I don't know if there's been a more used or trodden on stat than the MIT study.
You know what? I kind of like I keep away from that one. I prefer the IBM and the Accenture ones just because they've got a larger sample size. Because the MIT one, I think, was smaller, too small of a sample size to be properly representative, but it's all in the same direction. A lot of people are trying. Many people are not being able to scale. Most people aren't being able to generate kind of substantial kind of value out of this. And so the thing is like, this is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of, I think, reasons to that, which we could get into. But, one of the main things that we're hearing, we work with a lot of like regulated industries,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, yeah, AI, we're doing, AI projects across the business, but we've yet to do anything really in our core operation or our core customer service function.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons is, because of trust.
Right.
I think we've seen some of these stories like Air Canada deploying a customer service agent that gives a bad refund, or the McDonald's drive-through that orders a billion burgers by accident because this thing wasn't appropriately governed or
I
whatever.
think I saw the best one I saw, I think, was somebody who effectively conned a bot into selling them a car for $1. And they had to sell the car for $1.
I love it. Life hack. But yeah, the reality is, right, like in a regulated industry, you can't deal with hallucinations.
Uh-uh.
You can't deal with variability. Things have to be done the same way every single time, following your rules, following your standards, and driving repeatability and auditability across the board.
Yeah.
So that's really been our focus is introducing AI agents which enterprises can trust, rely on, and aren't subject to a lot of the hallucination. But also the other side of it is are maintainable. Because, if you were to try and build the most reliable AI agent or consistent AI agent out there, but using a traditional AI agent development approach, you would you'd go about it by building a prompt, which is the size of, the Bible or War and Peace, right?
Right.
You would just have to write every single rule, give a million examples, and then publish that to the AI and say, follow this. And then, what would you have? You'd have all of this text, which you'd have to maintain going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So what if your process changed? What if your rules changed? You'd have to
Right.
go back and control F and find every instance and blah, blah, blah. So our approach is about, enabling predictability, but not by introducing, 1,000-page prompts.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about, defining structured processes, structured rules in the ways that business people approach them today, and then having the AI pull from that in terms of its behavior and be governed by those frameworks.
And is that what? Because I've also seen Alan and Don, that's Alan Traffler and Don Schuerman, kind of talk about the right approach to implementing kind of AI. Is that what you mean by that? Is actually rather than just going, you give everything over to the, you write the War and Peace and you give it over to the as a prompt, and you give it, and there's so much kind of variance because you could submit that one question to the agent and then do 5 minutes later, and there's a likelihood that you might get something kind of different just based on the kind of the way that these models are set up. But is it that they, is that what they're talking about, the right approach to implementing AI?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the sort of reasoning aspects of these AI agents is awesome for creative work, really dynamic work. Like, give it, have it generate stories for you, and it'll be different every time based on the same prompt, and that's awesome. But if you want to get a customer service, incident resolved end to end, and you want to make sure it follows your process, you got to have a structured process on the back end, which the agent is pulling from. So the way that we've approached this in our latest release is with what we call predictable AI agents.
Okay.
And essentially what they are is it limits the amount of reasoning which is baked into the agent.
Okay.
And what the agent acts as is almost like a conversational concierge to the workflows which you want to drive anyway. So your structured processes. So if a customer calls in, it won't make up a way to process it, but it will find the right process that exists in your system and walk them through that.
Okay. And I think the important thing here is, for me, is that it sometimes seems that some of the talk is around whether it's generative AI or AI agents or agentic AI and things. It's always a bit like, you can just throw away everything else that's happened and just kind of rely on this, and that they'll figure it out, sort of thing. But actually, and I think this is something that Alan and Don were sort of referring to, is that sometimes and oftentimes there is value in the way that you do things, because that can be part of how you differentiate yourself, or just because it's how you approach things, how you do business, and that can make you a difference. And sometimes the value, there's IP in the process, and so therefore breaking it down and having it controllable and auditable and governable and all these different sort of things is starting from how do you want to do business, rather than having something else tell you how you want to do business, is a way of going about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, your processes, your rules is what makes you a business, right? Yeah. So leaving that up to just the inherent knowledge in a large language model, or, the hallucinations that come with it, is just not a recipe for success.
And there's another thing that I know that Pega folks have been talking about, and which I want to ask about, which was that about being very intentional about the sort of tools that you pick for the job or the problem at hand, because we all know it's like, generative AI or agentic AI or this or that, and I wanted to ask you to explain that, because I think it's an important kind of point that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much as it should, because we have to we have to concede that AI offers all of these different sort of tools, but it's not like a one tool fits all type of thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, there's that age-old thing when you have a hammer, everything's a nail or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so if you start a project and you're like, I need to, let's go back to complaints. I need to transform complaints.
Mm.
And you open up your AI agent builder, you're going to build the whole thing in AI as an AI agent, even if like some of it may be more fit for a more traditional automation or
Mhm.
statistical AI or whatever it may be. So the way that we sort of approach it is starting first with the customer journey itself. So what are you trying to drive? What are
Right.
the major milestones of that customer journey? What is the work that needs to get done within it? What are the checkpoints? What are the regulations you need to pass throughout it? And then within that, you can fill in whatever makes sense. Do you need like a human to fill out some information? Do you want to call on an AI agent? Do you need to integrate with a legacy system through an RPA bot?
Sure.
So, it all starts with having that sort of framework, the end-to-end customer experience you're trying to drive, and then within that, being able to fill in the right tools for the right job and have that whole thing orchestrated from end to end.
Yeah. No, it kind of labors the point which I have to make is like start with the end in mind, which is the old saying, right? It's like imagine the kind of experience that you want to deliver, and then figure out kind of what you need to facilitate, whether that's data, tech, or integrations and things. But one final thing on this kind of subject, the which I think is interesting, and I want to just maybe this is a learning moment for me because I know that Don and others and Alan, I think, I've talked about the difference between design time and run time. And I was like, okay, for people that are in this, their service execs or leaders, professionals or experience, people that are in the experience space as well, I'm not sure they may not completely understand the distinction between those sort of two things. And I wanted just to well, I'm saying, well, I want to learn from the horse's mouth kind of what the distinction is, kind of like the two. I think I get it, but like I'd like to hear it kind of like live and on tape, as it were.
Yeah, I'm the horse, I'm assuming.
Yes, you are.
Okay, okay, cool.
Please don't
Uh,
be offended. You're a good-looking
no,
horse.
it's all good. It's all good. I've heard I look more like a turtle in the past. I know this is
No,
an audio medium, but you can imagine me now.
no comment.
um, so yeah, so design time, runtime. Essentially, design time is when you build an application, and
Mhm.
runtime is when it's executing and actually, driving work and
Okay.
deployed out as executable software.
Hmm.
So, I think there's a couple things. One is our approach really where a lot of platforms they're using AI agents at runtime, and that's awesome. And we're doing that too to drive, work automation and to drive, customer experience gains. As we've talked about with Blueprint and with AI assisted development, we've also put a heavy focus on using AI agents to help enterprises deploy new applications and automations faster. So
Right.
that's AI agents at design time,
Right.
essentially. But the other thing that I think we've also seen is AI agents can also help bridge the gap a little
Yeah.
bit
Okay.
between the two. So, like we've seen AI agents be able to do things like design code, write code, and execute it all within the same workspace,
Okay.
right? So then it's
Okay.
like, all right, am I designing something or am I running something? It becomes a little bit blurred at
Right.
that.
Okay. I see. And that sort of makes sense because I've seen also other sort of ones that these some of the agents that are being developed, which are almost auditing the work that's getting done by other kind of agents. So you can go, oh, design, and then again they're running, but then they're also kind of auditing the kind of process as it kind of goes to spot improvements and making sure everything's kind of all properly knitted together.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's, always been the issue that hey, as an enterprise, I want to deploy new automations. So I'm going to spend, weeks or months defining those out and making them perfect.
Mm.
And then what happens? Customer behavior changes, the business changes, regulations change. So those processes get stale and they build up inefficiencies and manual work within them.
Yeah.
So, traditionally you'd have to go through a process improvement, project. You gotta, get those people involved and figure out how you're going to approach making them better. and then the whole thing repeats. So,
Yeah.
having AI which can analyze, like process mining data, which is something, that we've started to do,
Mhm.
where in real time you have AI actually picking up on where are bottlenecks building up throughout my process. What's the impact of them? What's the sort of the most impactful areas that I could actually begin to evolve?
Mhm.
And then also, starting with suggesting how to fix that,
Mhm.
and then even going that last mile into implementing a fix for approval for deployment back to production. So you're really entering this continuous improvement cycle.
And that becomes, you get into that kind of the realm of the self-healing enterprise, I guess.
Yeah, self-healing. We call it autonomous.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think the kind of the word that kind of sort of predates all that, sort of probably from sci-fi kind of like literature, is probably self-healing thing. But yeah, no, the autonomous enterprise, which is a recurrent theme of Pegasus as well. But so Matt, we talked about some of that sort of stuff, and you mentioned the MIT study, and I kind of like mentioned also the IBM and Accenture kind of like studies, and how many people in organizations are struggling with this for various kind of issues, for various reasons. And I wanted to ask you, like, so what are the most successful companies doing to generate momentum, to generate returns, to be able to scale, to and to harness the potential, the obvious potential that's in front of us? What are some of the key things that they're doing?
Yeah. I think I've gotten the opportunity to hear from a lot of enterprises on their AI strategy and where they're at. I'll tell you, I think the reason behind this whole 95% of AI agents aren't realizing return on investment, or however it's phrased. And my gut says, based on what I've seen, is that these pilots that enterprises are taking on in this space were never set up to realize return on investment.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is every enterprise they have like corporate edicts that say we need to adopt agentic AI. So then they have teams who begin all these pilot projects. And how do they start? They start with the low hanging fruit,
Mm-hmm.
which is it. That's probably where I'd start too, right?
Sure.
It's good stuff. But a lot of the AI projects that are out there, they're like simple chatbots on top of data sets that already existed.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking something up, you can ask an AI agent to go look it up for you.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, that's cool. That's a good marginal benefit. It's going to save employees a couple minutes here and there. But there's no opportunity to scale that into something that's actually transformational. So what I've seen, some of our more the enterprises that we worked with that have had success, like, Rabobank spoke about how they're really transforming fraud operations,
Mm-hmm.
and, catching more fraud and processing it faster. And the way that they've approached that is not by, saying we have to use AI agents and like, let's go start to build these chatbots, but actually looking at what is their fraud process from beginning to end.
Right.
And then using that same approach that we talked about of, okay, where are the most impactful areas for me to apply AI within this? So, really putting the lens on how do we adopt AI into our core operation rather than on the external bits
Sure.
of our operation.
Okay. Perfect. So I think that's almost done with my bigger questions, unless there's anything else that you want to highlight that I've missed out. If not, then I'll ask you some quick fire questions to finish up.
Ooh, I'm on the hot seat?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
let's
are.
do the hot seat.
All right. So we talked about a whole bunch of things. And so what I've been doing on the podcast is asking people to boil it down. And I've been asking them to do that by completing a sentence. And the sentence is this: if you want to improve your customer or employee experience, Matt Healy says, do this, ... Complete that sentence.
Accelerate your path to the cloud with AI agents like those embedded into Pega Blueprint.
Oh, God, shameless plug. Oh, never mind. That's fine. So, that's great. But it's also kind of like, it's great advice as well. So to just accelerate kind of like the path to the cloud. Now for a punk related one, because, well, how could I not? It's a Punk CX podcast, obviously. So what company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience, and why?
Takes a more punk approach. That's a good question. There's not really a lot of punk out there in the corporate world, to be honest. I'll tell you one that wasn't punk. The one that I wanted to be, I wanted to take a punk stance and rip apart a little bit was I was at Taco Bell over the
Okay.
weekend for the first time in a while. I was heading to a Halloween party and I was like, it said bring an appetizer or whatever, and I was like, what if I bring 50 tacos? Who's not gonna love that? So I stop at Taco Bell, I go through the drive-through, and it was an AI agent taking my order.
Okay.
So I'm telling it, what do you have that I can order 50 tacos with or whatever? Like, what's the best way to do that? And it just starts adding things to my order. I'm screaming at it.
Not
And then
that.
I know. So, made me want to, take a little Sex Pistol stance on that thing. But
I can imagine Matt getting out of his car
yeah.
trying to throttle the voice kind of like interface. Yeah.
So I guess, the one thing that I think we're all probably seeing is we still like a human touch
Yeah.
where it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it would be punk for enterprises to still figure out, how do you drive these automations? How do you drive the level of efficiency that you need to stay competitive while still finding the ways to bring that sort of human element into customer service?
Here, here. And final question is this, and this before we wrap up. So I would like to end on a good news story because the world's weird right now. Let's not get into it. And trying to shine a bit of kind of like light and positive energy on things just to end the conversations. Not that it's been all doom and gloom, obviously, but just as a share a different story. So can you tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week? And in particular, something that's made you just smile and you went, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We actually just published a success story video this week that I loved because I was involved with it from the get-go. Is with the Swedish Public Employment Agency. So they're big users of Pega. They happen for a number of years to help, deliver more digital citizen services. So rather than, in Sweden, you want to apply for a federal job, rather than sending in a document and waiting 4 weeks to hear back, you're able to do it on the website. And what they've done is they've started to adopt Pega Blueprint into their operating model. And they're now bringing new workflows to their website, to their mobile app, to life to enable their citizens in 40 days or less. So I love, that's what gets me up in the morning is helping enterprises like that, agencies like that, especially deliver better services to their people, and do it faster.
Nice. Well, Matt, that's all I have for you today. I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your expertise with me today. And also good luck in your modernizing kind of like legacy mainframe, sort of like rock star kind of like appearance, kind of the upcoming event. I'm sure you're going to smash it. But yeah, thanks very much.
Appreciate it. I'll take all the luck I can get. So thank you. And thanks for having me, Andrew.
You're very welcome.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.